Welcome back to the Think Deeper podcast, presented by Focus Press. I'm your co-host, Will Harrop, joined by Joe and Jack Wilkie. Welcome into episode number, we were talking before, we were trying to count up the episode numbers. We're somewhere in the 80s. Somehow we have lost track of the exact number. 81, 82, 80, somewhere in there is where we're at. So we are excited to be that close to 100 episodes. We thank you to everybody who faithfully listens and comments and gives us feedback on episodes and such, whether it be Facebook or through Focus Plus. And speaking of that, we did want to push for especially our Focus Plus subscribers to be sure and leave comments, leave your thoughts, leave questions. If an episode sparks a question that you have in your mind about maybe the episode itself or maybe something else, feel free to drop a comment on the episode link in our Patreon site on the when we post the video for the podcast, because that's the content that we use for our Deep End segment, which is, again, just directly responding to questions, directly responding to comments that you have. So be sure and take advantage of that. And then if you're not a Focus Plus subscriber, obviously, first of all, we feel free to sign up and join. There's a lot of perks and benefits that you have there. And I'm going to actually turn it over to Jack here in a second to advertise another big one that we've got dropping here in the next couple days. But even if you're not a Focus Plus subscriber, we read every Facebook comment. We pull from Facebook and from YouTube comments for episode content, for again, just responding to questions. And so feel free to leave your feedback there as well if you're not a Focus Plus subscriber, and we'd be happy to respond to that. But Jack, I do want to hand it to you because we do have something exciting that's dropping. Is it tomorrow? At least in the next couple days, that is going to be the latest offering from Focus Plus. Even if you're not a subscriber, don't skip past this part because it is super interesting. We're super excited about it. Jack, I'll hand it over to you for that.
Yeah, I mean, we've been putting out all kinds of content every week since Focus Plus launched, but we also wanted it to be a stable that grew over time, where we are giving more stuff. And the first one of those that we are adding on is the Book of Revelation class taught by Joe and taught by Joe and me. I'm trying to get my grammar right so I don't get corrected somewhere along the way. Joe and me.
Myself?
Joe
and myself.
Taught by Joe and me. Me and Joe, actually. Okay, there we go. English teachers, help me out here. I write for a living. You'd think I would be better at this, but that's what we pay the proofers for. The Book of Revelation class. We've been teaching it at Jackson Temple Church of Christ, where the three of us attend, and it's a fascinating study. I already kind of knew generally what I thought about it, but we wanted to go more in depth, and so we've been taking turns, and it's every bit as crazy of a book as you think, but I also think that it's badly misunderstood, and not just by the crazy premillennial China is the great dragon out of the sea kind of thing, but a lot of the standard teaching you hear on it, we believe kind of misses the point. We believe also it's a little more understandable than you think when you put it in its historical context, and so that we're pretty excited to roll that out. We really hope a lot of people will want to join Focus Plus to get access to that and everything else we're doing.
As somebody who has sat through the class, obviously I have not been teaching. As somebody who sat through it, it has been fascinating. It's been really, really good. There are some very heavy parts where it's like, man, this is a lot to think about, but it's been so educational and so informative of like, oh, I'd never heard that before. And so I would encourage any of our listeners, if you're curious about Revelation and don't really know where to start, here's a resource of where to start, dropping here in the next couple of days. Understudied is what we're calling it. So, Joe, anything to add to that before I get us into today's episode?
Yeah, the understudied banner is not just Revelation. After Revelation, I'm doing a class that I taught at Nashville School of Preaching for Song of Solomon. We're going to have a few, and that's why we call it understudied. You never hear Song of Solomon classes. You never hear Revelation classes past maybe Revelation 2 and 3 with the 7 churches and back, the last chapters at the end in 21 and 22. Like, nobody really wants to delve into those things, so there's a lot of times Christians have never seen it. It's understudied. That's the whole point of this. We're going to have a few other books thrown in there as well that we'll release in due time. Minor prophets that you just don't get. And so that's the whole point of the understudy. We're starting with Revelation. I'm excited about it as well. Yeah, it's exciting to teach, though I almost feel lost half the time. But no, I think it's good, and it's been hopefully it's very fruitful. So if you are listening to this and you are not subscribed, that is yet another reason. I think there's literally like a dozen plus reasons to subscribe to Focus Plus, the free shipping, the the discounts you get, the premium access you get to certain things. This is just another thing. If you need some Bible class content or you really want to know Revelation from our side of things, yeah, go ahead and check that out and subscribe. That'll be dropping, I believe, tomorrow, 1st of August.
Awesome. Yep, excited about that. But guys, let's go ahead and get into our episode for today. Bit of a different one. We've been talking about the last couple of weeks how we can trust our Bible, or why we can know we can trust our Bible. We looked at how we can know that the Bible is inspired based on prophecies and scientific accuracy and all kinds of stuff. That was 2 weeks ago. Last week, we took a closer look at alleged contradictions, some of the questions that people have about, has man seen God or has man not seen God? And, things that the skeptics will throw at us Christians about, your Bible says this here and this another place. How do you answer it? And so we looked at a lot of those alleged contradictions last week and tried to do our best to answer a lot of those and really shore up our faith as Christians for those 2 episodes. Well, with this episode, we wanted to do something in the same vein as looking at our Bibles, but in a bit of a more lighthearted manner. We were talking and we were like, we've done some top 5 lists in the past, some top 7 lists, I think, once or twice with this podcast. And so we were like, why don't we do a top 5 Bible books episode? And so what we're going to do with this week's episode, again, it is going to be a little bit more lighthearted, but we are going to get into discussions about why we think that these are why these are on our list, why these are in our top 5, and then to conclude the episode, because again, we're each going to approach. We each have a different top 5 of what is our favorite Bible book. So obviously, going to be some subjectivity there. All 3 of us kind of like to argue, so I'm sure we're going to treat it as objective, like these are objectively the best books. But at the end, we are going to get into a discussion that I think is going to be super interesting about what do we think are the top 5 most important books of the Bible, and to get the qualifiers out of the way, we're not trying to say that certain parts of the Bible are unimportant or anything like that, but I think it would be foolish to think that, or we'd be foolish to say that there aren't more important books of the Bible. I mean, you've got obviously salvation and things that you don't really read a ton of salvation implications in Numbers. There's a few, but you get my drift here. And so that's going to be a very interesting discussion there at the end about what are the top 5 most important Bible books. I'm sure we each have our lists, and we have not revealed these to each other. We're going to be completely surprised with each one of these. But guys, let's start with the top 5 Bible books. And I'm going to go ahead, and we didn't talk about this before. We're going to do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for our top 5 favorite. I'm going to go ahead and make the executive decision. When we switch to the most important, let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That way we can make the case for why this is the most important compared to the next one. But for these favorites, for the top 5 favorites, we'll do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Who wants to start? I've been talking for a couple minutes straight. Jack, you want to go first with your number 5 favorite Bible book?
Okay, this is hard. You have to have a gospel. I mean, you have to have one. Picking between the 4, oh man, I don't know.
If you have a gospel as your 5th, it doesn't even make the top 3. Oh man.
Well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, this is the hard part. Ranking. I mean, like, I don't know. And so I put Mark. John is right there, but then it's like, well, but Matthew, but Luke, and so I just put Mark because I've been studying Mark. I preached through Mark over a couple year period. I'm putting out a Bible class study guide through Focus Press on Mark, so I've been writing that for forever now, just bits and pieces slowly, but it's almost done. And so I guess in the moment I'm going to say Mark, and I'll give the why. It is the shortest of all the Gospels, but because of that, it is. Somebody said that it reads like a comic.
Jack's not a big reader. He doesn't like to read.
He just doesn't want to read.
Big reader. Yeah, give me the Cliff Notes. What did he do when he was here? Yeah, no. It reads like a comic book, and then it's this incredible action in one after the next, and just frame to frame to frame. If he healed this person, and he cast out this demon, and he taught this, and then he moved on and he argued with these people and all that. But it's woven together really well. It speaks to a Gentile audience in like wowing them with here is this very powerful person and why he should be important to you, why this matters to you. But there's also a lot of sourcing and rooting stuff in the Jewish traditions and scriptures and things they would understand. And the middle of the book where he kind of transitions from here's who Jesus is and why you need to believe in him to and here's what it means. You're going to go to the cross. He's going to the cross. You've got to take up your cross. He does a really cool thing that I've written about before and is going to be in the Bible study guide, using the blindness healings as almost a parable in the text when you're studying how Mark kind of uses that as a symbol for your understanding of Jesus. And so there's just really cool little bits like that the deeper you dig into the book, there's a lot to really enjoy. I don't know. But of the four, I could be talked into any of the four Gospels, but I had Mark as my number 5.
I just got out of it that Jack just likes short comic books, like a 10-year-old, so...
It's the Marvel comic book of the Gospels.
Marvel comic
That's what it is. Right. No, I get it. I think that's... I'll be honest, we could throw that one on understudied as well. How often do you... They didn't even have a class at Bear Valley on Mark. I didn't get it.
Because it was too similar to Matthew, and they're like, well, if we give you Matthew,
exactly.
You're close enough. And I mean, there's a lot of
Matthew's
overlap.
younger brother. Right. It may be written by people. No, just kidding. There's, textual criticism concerning Mark and such, but it's not studied very often because it is kind of the little brother of the Gospels. It is short. It has a lot of repeat stuff, but when you go through and you read it, and what I've heard is that it's from kind of the Roman perspective, or he's writing to the Romans in a way, that you start to see the keywords, the immediate, and there's, as you talked about, the blind and the demon possession, that's key throughout Mark. So the little bit that I've studied, it's fascinating. We just don't study it very often, so I think that's interesting to have as 5. It's very interesting. Will,
go for it, Joe.
Okay.
No, I got nothing to add to that. You go ahead and give your number 5.
This is going to get me shot. I have Genesis as number 5. So, Genesis number 5. I figured on your guys. Is this... I shouldn't ask if it makes your list. I want to know if it makes your list.
It's on our list.
Gotta wait to find out. Gotta wait to find out.
It's on, okay.
Okay, yeah.
It's on mine. I just gave that away, but yeah. It's not at 5, though. I mean, come on.
That's what I figured that you would hate me for, is the fact that it is at 5. And you know me, I did like what feels like dozens of sermons on just the first 3 chapters of Genesis, and kind of the way that everything breaks up from the fall, but pre-fall and marriage. And I mean, all of life is really set up there, and the masculine mandate of like, hey, go out and basically take dominion and be fruitful and multiply and everything else. And so if you took the first 3 chapters of Genesis alone, and that was all the book was, it would still make my list because of how theologically jam-packed that is in 3 chapters. And so you take those and then you move on, and you're starting to see the way mankind kind of unfolds, right? You see Cain, and you see things get worse and worse up until the flood. And then after the flood, what's the first thing that happens? We see him getting drunk, and they're kind of like starting the process all over, where him is seeing his father's nakedness. Like, here we go again. We just got off the ark where the whole earth was wiped out for the sin, and we can't even stay, it's like 2 days, right? And we're back at it again. So I think that's fascinating. You get to Babel. It explains so much about human history, while at the same time explaining so much about God, explaining the Abraham covenant. It's for most. I was going to say I'm going to give away in the fact that yes, on the most important list, of course, this makes that one. But for favorite, I just genuinely think it's a fascinating book. The Joseph story arc is fascinating. You got some Judah and Tamar weird stuff in there. It's like, what in the world? So from a literary perspective, I mean, it's kind of the ultimate book, historical and spiritual, and it's calling ahead to so many things in the New Testament. Genesis is amazing.
I'll be very interested to see how much our lists align as we get closer to number 1, because I have a different top 5, or a different number 5, I guess I should say. I've got Proverbs as my number 5 book. And as I was compiling my list of my top 5 favorites, it was very hard. We've joked before, these guys are very Old Testament biased. They love their Old Testament books. And I tend to just enjoy studying and preaching from the New Testament more. So I was trying not to have too much New Testament bias in my list. And so I've got another Old Testament book on my list. I won't reveal which one it is, but as I was thinking about, what are my favorite ones from the Old Testament other than the other one that I have on my list, I got to thinking about Proverbs and just how much we've got a family worship guide that Focus Press does. There's a lot of good devotional study books out there for you to do with your kids. The entire book of Proverbs is basically the perfect family devotional book for your family that could last you basically their entire life. I mean, you think about how rich the book of Proverbs is with lessons you could teach your kids, with lessons you need to know yourself, of course, but I realize I'm kind of underselling the need for the family worship guide here, but just take the book of Proverbs and you've got a fantastic resource on lessons that you can teach your kids over and over again. Me and Rachel were studying just the 3rd chapter of Proverbs And man, it took us 4 or 5 nights to get through, all the things that are linked together, all the different themes that are, because sometimes in Proverbs it seems like, you got one verse talking about one thing, and then he moves on to something else, and then something else, and something else. But to see the way that especially in chapter 3 that we were studying, the different themes are linked throughout the entire chapter. And again, there's just so much there that to me is really, really valuable. Really, really enjoy teaching from. Really, really enjoy preaching from. And yeah, I'm excited for when my kids get to be old enough. Again, we'll study the whole Bible, of course, but I imagine we'll be spending a lot of time in Proverbs. Just the wisdom literature that you get from that, to me, is made it worthy of number 5.
That's it works perfectly because it rolls right into my number 4, which is also Proverbs. Which,
hey, there you go.
For me, is probably like Mark. It's recency bias in that my family, our nightly devos have been in Proverbs for a while now. We got through. We're trying to go a New Testament, Old Testament, New Testament. So we finished Matthew. We went to
So you're
Proverbs,
not using the family worship guide then? Gotcha. Okay.
You didn't give me one. That's the problem. Is you
Okay.
never. I've never bought one. Because I'm cheap. I don't know. But yeah, we will read like 10 verses of the Proverbs and just kind of pick out 1 or 2 that catch our eye. And it's kind of funny. Even the 5-year-old, is like picking up on wickedness and righteousness and diligence and like what does that mean? And we have those profitable conversations like you're talking about, but. For the longest time, I had a hard time with Proverbs because there, you'll hear that theory and the idea, which I think isn't a bad idea, that everything in the Bible points to Jesus. And if it's not about him, then you're misunderstanding it. It's like, well, how's Proverbs about Jesus? It's not about your atonement. It's not about our shortcomings. I mean, sometimes that path in the Old Testament to Jesus is very clear, and other times it's, again, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, even Song of Solomon. It's like, well, how does this connect to Jesus? And the more you get into it, the more you realize it's about the lordship of Christ over all of life and wise living, that God loves us enough to give us wise living. And when we kind of overly do the spiritual and the pietistic thing and remove ourselves from the real world, and I think there really was a push towards that for a number of years. Some of the Francis Chan, David Platt stuff had value, but some of it really drove us away from like being grounded in real life of like, hey, buy a house, get a job, raise a family, work hard. These are good things. Like it's not all mission work. It's not all evangelism. It's not all, directly church-related work. That there are real-life things that matter. And Proverbs, I really feel like has been underrated in that sense. I mean, you read where it talks about working hard and making money. And you read that and it's like, well, how is this compatible with Christianity? Because this is what God would have us do.
Right. I thought money was evil type of thing.
Right. Work hard, earn a fair wage, provide for our family, things like that. And so, very similar to where you are, but it just, to me, grounds our Christianity in the real world in ways that we can get away from when we don't understand that or don't apply Proverbs properly. Joe, number 4?
I guess I'm a dunce or a fool, I guess, as Proverbs would say, because I don't like wisdom. I didn't put
Joe's not a big Proverbs guy.
I've been studying through, actually. I do think it's great, but I already know it, so it's... No, just kidding.
Oh, boy.
Number 4. I was just thinking, do it with young kids. Like, I don't really want Harrison asking me what a harlot is, so there may be parts I skip around with. But, it is great with the kids and with family in so many ways. But... Number 4, I have my own gospel. Not my own gospel. I have John. Jack had his at number 5. I have mine at 4. John is I just got done preaching through and did kind of seeing who Jesus is, right? Who is Jesus through the Gospels, and specifically in John, because Matthew, Mark, and Luke and the Synoptic Gospels give a very historical painting of Jesus, which is obviously we have to have that, and we'll get into this in the most important and which one's most important, because there is some significance, obviously, to why John may not make that, potentially. We'll discuss that. At the same time, as far as favorite goes, I mean, John is fascinating. When you look at the way that he paints who Jesus is going throughout the book, he gives you the 3D picture. It's not just, hey, this happened and this is who Jesus is. It's like Jesus is the creator, and he's the light of the world, and he's the word of God, and he's the tabernacle, and he's the Jacob's ladder, and he's the Lamb of God, and he's the, all of that. And he walks through, and so you see the way that John opens up, and it's just such a fascinating study. And And yeah, the way he portrays Jesus and the way that there's such a structure, like, it's not my time yet, it's not my time yet, it's not my time. Here's my time. I also like the fact that though he doesn't give the Lord's Supper, we also know that chapters 13 through 17 are part of the Lord's Supper. It's kind of that, like, peel the curtain back. What actually happened there? Matthew gives us less than 10 verses really kind of on it, of what's taking place there.
His prayer in chapter 17 is fascinating.
His prayer is fascinating.
You get that much detail into what was on his mind that night.
Exactly. So all of these things, I'm the vine, you're the branches, like the unity that he presents and all of that, and the Holy Spirit's role and how it's better for me to leave and the Holy Spirit to come. So you look at the way that he sets them up for their future. I feel like it really sets, I'm trying to think of how to say it, like it really sets the apostles up for how they went and did what they did. And the other ones, yeah, you're walking with Jesus and you see, but this was like, let me teach you these things. It's not just him teaching the crowds, but specifically in 13 through 17, guys, you have the most important role in the world. You're going to have to take the gospel to all nations. And it shows how they're about to do it. And then he pulls Peter back in after that in chapter 21. And after his, it's such a good book. And once again, maybe recency bias because I've been studying I was recently for sermons. But yeah, John is tough to beat that's my gospel that I would throw in there.
I read an entire book, I think it was Peter Leithart's Deep Exegesis, which is a great book about Bible study. And, I mean, this was an entire, probably 250-page book or something like that, about the symbolism, and he kind of branched out from here, but it was all based in the symbolism of Jesus healing the blind man in John 9. Like, there were that many layers to the one miracle. I mean, like, you can spend a year in every chapter of John and still be taking stuff out of it, of just the hints and the references and the cross connections that he puts in. I mean, it is a masterpiece literarily.
Yep, agreed. I'll go ahead and give my number 4. I've got Ephesians at number 4 for me.
It's a good one.
Again, starting in the end of the New Testament here, I had Proverbs 5, Ephesians 4. I got to thinking about all the shorter Pauline epistles. So, Colossians, Philippians, Ephesians, Galatians. I would throw in 1st, 2nd Timothy, Titus, and Philemon. To me, Ephesians is the best of that group. Obviously, he's got the bigger ones, Romans and 1st, 2nd Corinthians and such. But for the shorter ones, I find myself migrating towards Ephesians more. Just in the first 14 verses of Ephesians, you get just how incredibly blessed we as Christians are. And it sets the stage for the rest of the book. Obviously, you've got Galatians where he's kind of calling them out. He is calling them out in the first 6 verses, O foolish Galatians, in chapter 3. Philippians, obviously, about joy and rejoicing, and there's a lot of good stuff in Philippians as well. Obviously, the pastoral ones, 1st, 2nd Timothy, Titus. I like Ephesians the best. You get just how, in chapter 2, desperately hopeless we as humans are without God, but then also the but God verse, where he says, this is where you were, but because of God, this is how you are. And then he gets into the Jew-Gentile dynamic. And then chapters 4 through 6, really he delves into the practical more about here's how you put on the new man. Here's what the relationship between wives and husbands are supposed to look like. Here's how you are to walk. Here's how children and parents, bondservants and masters. There's just so much there that to me it's a pleasure to read because you're reminded of just how graciously blessed we are. And just basically, really, again, it's like a two-sided coin of how much we don't deserve it, but then how much God blesses us anyway. And that's just so refreshing and so enjoyable and pleasant to read. But then also, it's kind of a call to duty, so to speak, like because you're this blessed, this is how you're supposed to live. And these are the standards that God is going to hold you to put on the new man, to put off the old, to live in this way, to have your marriages look like this, to have your parenting look like this, to walk in this way, to walk away from these things. And so, again, to me, it's just got a little bit of everything, of the theological richness, but also the practical, here's how you're supposed to live, and we as Christians are expected to live a certain way, and obviously closes out with the armor of God and some fascinating stuff there. I like Ephesians a lot, in case you couldn't tell. The other ones are great as far as the shorter ones, but I've got Ephesians 4.
I think it was hard to, I didn't put it on my list, but it was very hard to leave off because for 6 chapters, it might pack like a pound, the term pound for pound.
Pound, right.
Yeah, better punch than almost any Bible book of how much he covers, how practical, how deep, how theologically rich, all that
Very
stuff.
Easy to exegete as well.
Right. Yeah, 3 chapters.
This is not the last time we'll be seeing Ephesians. I'll just say that.
Okay.
Joe is spoiling everything, man.
I am. We still got 3 though,
right.
so All right, number 3. Who's Jack? Is it back to you?
Yeah, back to me. Okay, I've got the Psalms, and 3 feels disrespectfully low, but I don't know.
You've got Psalms and Proverbs in your top 4.
Yeah, I mean, of course. I do want to give a plug. We are right in the middle of a 2-episode arc on Who Let the Dogma Out. We did one on Psalms last week. Proverbs is coming this week. And about, like, how useful they are, but how much things would change if we used them more. The Psalms, like, literally is a songbook. They were Israel's songbook. They were the church's songbook. I mean, Psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. There's reason to believe that what Paul meant by that was the book of Psalms, because of the way the Septuagint labeled them, the Psalms, the hymns, and spiritual songs within the Psalms. And so that's what they sang. And when you go through it, it takes you through everything in life. It takes you through all of the ups and downs. It takes you through anger and depression and sadness and hopelessness and happiness and joy and just thankfulness towards God and the goodness of God and recounting what God has done for his people and the promises. But also there's the messianic stuff in there of how much points to Jesus. Psalm 2, Psalm 110. I mean, you look at how often the Psalms are quoted in the New Testament. It's just chock full. It trains you to think and that's kind of where you pair it with Proverbs, is these both train you to think in the real world from God's perspective. You know, the Proverbs is kind of what comes out through your fingertips, the work that you do, the practical way you live your life, the people you're around, and things like that. The Psalms are in your heart and your head, what's going on in there, and it teaches you how to work through any emotion. You don't have to be happy all the time. Every single day when you wake up, there's a psalm for how you're feeling, what you're going through, what you need, that just trains you how to think as a Christian, as God would, as God's people always have. And you know, you're singing songs and thinking through songs that have been sung to God for 3,000 years. I mean, there's something really neat about that. And so, yeah, I could not leave the Psalms off. Like I said, it feels
nothing on that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I love all of our modern hymns, but really listen to the Dogma episode. We get into this deeper, but it's kind of, we sing as we currently understand God, and that's why some of the like really touchy-feely churches sing the songs that what people have called like the Jesus is a boyfriend or Jesus is my boyfriend songs, where they're essentially love songs, but they're about Jesus and they're really touchy. They're a little weird.
Strange. Yeah.
But you get to some of the Psalms, and it is dripping, you know, in affection and praise for God. And then the next one is, hey, God, these bad guys that are out there, shatter their teeth. And you're like, whoa. We just... The shift was really rapid there, but that's because
I didn't sing that on
everything.
Sunday morning. Yeah.
Yeah. But you need all of these. You need the Lamentations. You need the Imprecatory. You need all of this stuff to understand how to rightly order your brain and your heart before God. And so, yeah, I mean... The Psalms are so useful, and not just a chicken soup for the soul, okay, I'll read something and feel better. It has that effect, but it also has a way of training you to see the world the way God sees it.
Jack's got me feeling really bad that I don't have Psalms in my top 5.
You should feel terrible that you don't have it.
You should.
I feel bad that I don't have it number 1. We all failed. We all just came short. Unless Joe has number 1.
Jack's got
Mr. Spoiler over
Ecclesiastes
there.
and Song of Solomon as number 2, or 2
right,
and 1.
wisdom literature.
Yeah, apparently.
all the way down.
Yeah, Job was the honorable mention, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Psalms is number 3. Psalms is 3 for me as well. And I'm with Jack. I think that seems too far up the list, but at the same time, from the very first, there's not a lot I'm going to add. I'm just going to say Psalm number 1 is one of the greatest things written in the Bible. Look, man, there's 2 ways you can go. You can either be completely grounded in the Word of God. You can love it. You can chase after it. You can do everything and just be that firmly rooted tree. Or you can be the guy that is the progression of sin he starts with, of right walking, standing, sitting, and be like chaff that the wind drives away. If you're standing with the sinners, you're not going to stand in the judgment. I mean, there's one of the first like serious sermons I ever wrote was in Psalm 1, and I look back on it like, man, I missed so much. there's so much stuff.
Were there unserious sermons you wrote?
Yeah. I'm not counting any of my FPTC or any of my
okay.
Most of
like
my
legitimate sermons.
Legitimate, yes.
When you said serious sermons, I'm like, what's the opposite of a serious?
He gets up and does a comedic sermon.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
I've seen some guys try that.
I was going to say it.
That's true.
I have seen that. No, the Future Preachers sermons and the Homiletics 1 and 2, I look back on those like if I ever need a sermon in a pinch, I look back at some of what I wrote in Bear Valley and Homiletic 1 and it's like, these are horrible. How did I get any passing grade on this? This is terrible. But yes, that was kind of the first one that I like felt proud of doing. And I look back, it's like, man, I missed so much in that too. But really digging into just the very first psalm, yet again, kind of like Genesis, that sets you up. Psalm 23, beautiful. Psalm 119, packs such a punch. But I've made it my goal to exegete through the entire book of Psalms, and I'm probably up to about Psalm 55. I've just been working on it for the last few years of, look, I got other things, and I'll come back. And every time I get back into the Psalms, it's like, wow, this is really good. This is really, really good. And I stay there for a long time, and I just keep working. And I'm blessed by it. Every single day I get in the Psalms, regardless of whether that's an imprecatory or a crying out to God, God, where are you? I mean, there's always something relevant. So Jack said it really well. But Will, what do you got as number 3?
This is reminiscent of when we did the holiday episode, and we did like choose between these two things or whatever, and Joe and Jack were like aligned on everything, and I'm the one guy over here that's like, all right, I have a little bit of a different take, a little bit of.
I only lived in the same room with the guy like 15 years.
I was gonna say
that's why Joe made me go first, is so he can be like, yeah, that's what I had too.
Yeah, exactly. What's the next one? What's the next one? Is that?
I just know if I wasn't on this particular episode, you guys, man, it'd be real quick because
it'd be very boring. Yes, we need some variety here.
Thank you, Will.
No, I've got Genesis as number 3. Could not have a top 5 favorite without Genesis. And it's funny, I bet Genesis is in a lot of people's top 5 favorites because people always start their, yearly Bible reading, and what do they get through every time? I always get through Genesis, so Genesis is very well known. No, but I know y'all have already spoken on Genesis, so I won't spend too much time here. Just the fact that it lays the foundation for the rest of the Bible. Like Joe was talking about, the first 3 chapters, you get the need for redemption in chapter 3. You get the first messianic prophecy of like, look, we're going to win. Jesus is going to win in the end. And you get that 3 chapters into the Bible. It's just, the coolest thing, the stories, the character development. You get Joseph, who's one of, in my opinion, the best characters for us to learn from in all of God's word. You get Joseph. He gets 13 chapters. Obviously, you get introduced to Abraham and Noah and so many other good ones. But the fact that it literally is the foundation. You take Genesis away, and a lot of the Bible, you would misunderstand it. You wouldn't appreciate it as much. Got to have Genesis in the top 5, in my opinion. So yeah, I've got it at number 3 for me.
Nice. All right, so we're into top 2 territory now, huh?
Top 2.
3, 2, and 1. It was all interchangeable.
So real quick, recap your 5, 4, 3 again.
All right,
Jack?
So I had Mark, Proverbs, Psalms. I'm gonna go with Romans at 2. I'm sure that's probably supposed to be number 1 on my list, but I won't say a lot because I'm sure one of the two of you has it right at the top. As far as theological richness, I mean, there's a reason it's considered to be like the Bible's masterpiece, Paul's magnum opus, whatever you want to call it, because of it goes over. It's just the whole plan. It's sin, the fall, faith, grace, baptism, sanctification, growing in it, the Spirit's role, the promise we have ahead of us. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. God's plan to bring Jew and Gentile together in 9 through 11, and then the practical, and starting in chapter 12, and how to live as a Christian, and the living and holy sacrifice, and being transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Governments, I mean, it's just, in 13.
Yeah, government. Well, and that kind of branching off from, if possible, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Number 1, the government. Number 2, chapter 14, each other, matters of opinion, how to tolerate one another and not make each other stumble or judge each other. Romans 15. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, stem to stern. My buddy Daniel has been preaching through Romans for like 2 or 3 years, and you're like, okay, that's kind of ridiculous. But when you get down to it, you really can. You can spend that much time in there and get something out of it in that much time of weekly, 2 or 3 verses at a time, because it's just that heavy. There's so much that it teaches us about really God's plan for everybody. And so I've got it at 2. Like I said, I'll keep mine short this time.
I'm gonna cut in front of Joe because I also have Romans at 2. Romans is my number 2 as well.
Round it up, fellas.
Well, hold on. So Will hasn't done a gospel yet, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so
I've got Proverbs at 5, Ephesians 4, Genesis 3, and Romans at 2.
Okay, so it's got to be a gospel at number 1, but I'm really interested to hear which one it is. But go ahead with your Romans.
Yeah, Joe, are you saying Romans is your number 2 as well?
Okay.
Interesting. Okay, so we all have the same number 2.
Okay.
Number 1 is
I've got Joe's number 1 figured out. Will is a gospel, so we'll see.
Anyway, yeah, Jack, you summed up Romans very well. I am in the middle of, I shouldn't say the middle, I'm in the beginning of studying in-depth, verse by verse, exegeting as best I can the book of Romans. I'm in chapter 3, and just in the first, 2.5 chapters, it's like, wow, I really could, like you were talking about with Daniel, I really could spend the next 3 years here in Romans, because there is so much of theological richness of studying how Paul is presenting the gospel, how he's, presenting the Jew-Gentile dynamic, how he's presenting just, once again, how the grace of God is, how it's so undeserving, but how he freely bestows it. Yeah, I'm not even all the way through it. I haven't studied it near to the depth that these two guys have, but I am thoroughly enjoying the study of it. And as Jack laid out, I mean, I'll go ahead, and Joe's done his fair share of spoiling. I'll go ahead and spoil it. It is definitely on my top 5 most important books for sure, somewhere in there. I'm sure it probably is for you guys as well. I like Romans a lot. Joe, what did you have to add?
If Romans wasn't on a list of most important, we'd be having a very big discussion.
How would you feel if it wasn't on one of our top 5 favorite lists? Because favorite is a little more subjective. Would you question the validity of the list? It's like
I
top
question
5,
the validity of the
top
person
5.
for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, we all fall short, right?
Yeah. Nice, Mr. Romans. But yes, it's number 2 on my list. There's hardly anything else to add to it. My top 5 top 4 up to this point, 5 through 2, is Genesis, John, Psalms, and Romans. And yeah, I mean,
I know what Joe's is. I know what Joe's number 1 is.
Yeah,
then.
and
That's
once again, as we get into number 1, we're talking about favorite books, favorite to exegete, favorite to study.
Well, go ahead, and since you already kind of spoiled it, Joe, go ahead.
Yes. Ephesians is my number 1, and that's why I say it's the favorite. Do I think Ephesians is better than this? Please don't cancel us on this podcast. Are they saying that the Bible is better? Look,
the last time we asked people not to cancel us, it didn't go very well for a few weeks. So just
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, this is all for fun. These are things that we,
the Bible's all of the Bible's important. We know
exactly.
We know,
it's all inspired. Yeah, it's all worthy of study. We get that. But when it comes to what I enjoy studying the most, it would be Ephesians. For everything you said earlier, Will, I mean, the fact that the book breaks up into doctrinal and practical, you have a little bit of everything in a 6-chapter book. It's one of the best, one of the easiest books, in my opinion, to exegete, because there are different movements of the book, but at the same time, it's all carrying through a very simple principle overall. You have the 2 prayers of Paul. It's the only book where you see 2 of his prayers laid out that way. And both of those really spell out the prayer in chapter 1 spells out 1 through 3, and the prayer at the end of chapter 3 spells out 4 through 6, kind of getting ready for that. It's so much fun to study, and Romans, as good as it is, Romans is really, really deep, and you can get lost in the weeds, and you get into chapters 9, 10, and 11, and you go, what is going on? You got to pull out a lot of commentaries, things like that, start asking your buddies, what do you think about these things? And so Romans is a deep study. It's fantastic, but Ephesians is like, you could pick up, anyone I feel like could pick up Ephesians and just have a really good time studying it. So, yeah, that would be my number 1.
How do we feel about Jack not having it anywhere near his top 5?
Yeah, come on, guy.
Crazy.
Anywhere near it. I mean, it might be number 6. I mean, that, John, I don't know. It's up there.
I'm sure. Song of Solomon's not
Jack's
number 6
top 5 NBA players ever probably also doesn't include, Kareem or something like that. That one's
that would be a fun one. Yeah, no. Number 1, Nikola Jokic. Number 2, Jamal Murray. Number 3.
I gotta say, I did expect Joe to pull out Habakkuk or something in his top 5. I really love Habakkuk.
I genuinely thought about putting Malachi. I love the book of Malachi, and when I studied Jonah's a fascinating book too. But I didn't want to be that guy.
Jonah's
wild.
Jonah is the textbook case of VBS makes you think you know a book, and you go back through it, and it's like, whoa. This is it is insane. I mean, it is. I can't even get into it on this podcast, but no, the layers to it, the everything that's going on there, it is gigantic. 4 chapters. I mean, so much as a kid, you come out thinking Jonah, everything ended up good. No, it didn't. It ended up in a horrible place. He's not doing well. And the whole book is a condemnation on Israel, and it's, the way Jesus references it, don't get me started on Jonah. We might have to do an episode
honorable
on
mention
Jonah sometime.
for Jonah. Yeah.
Or
we're going to do understudy.
VBS
I want to
myths
throw
or
that in
something.
understudy.
Yeah, we'll put it on understudied on Focus Plus. But VBS myths, we might have just come up with an episode or something.
I like that.
There you go. So I'm going to go ahead and give my number 1. I also, Joe, do you have any idea what Jack says? I'm trying to peg his. So he's got 2 Old Testament books.
I gave it away. I said this earlier, if you were paying attention.
I missed it.
They weren't paying attention when I talked. That's what.
That's
usual.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. So Jack nailed it. I've got Matthew as my number one. I love the book of Matthew.
Sermon on the Mount.
Gotta have a gospel. Yeah, the Sermon on the Mount is just, to me, what takes it over the top. You've got the parables. You've got so much of teachable thing. There are so many teachable things from Matthew that, as you know, as much as Jack talked up Mark, it kind of skips over a lot as well. And so I love the depth to Matthew. I love the Great Commission at the end of Matthew 28. There's just so many reasons why I could preach from Matthew for 2 years. I think when I started at Jackson Temple, I actually did preach from just the Sermon on the Mount for the first 6 months or something like that. Like, I tried to go all the way through it. But it is my favorite gospel. You just got, again, so many things that John you can make a case for, but the parables in Matthew, again, the Sermon on the Mount, just the way you get to follow Jesus and you get to follow his apostles through it. To me, it's the perfect mix of Matthew telling us, okay, here's what happened. Here's a historical account of what happened to Jesus, but also, kind of intermixing the spiritual lessons as well, again, with the parables. And it's not just, you're not just reading history, you're reading the lessons of Jesus. And I think he does that brilliantly. So Matthew is my number one. Jack pegged it correctly. It was a gospel. I was not paying attention, Jack, to if you did give it away earlier.
That's fine. Man, you guys are making me rethink the Mark pick, because I really do like Mark, but Matthew is so good. John is so good. We haven't even talked about Luke. Luke's fantastic. I mean,
Jack's number one is Luke, yeah.
Yeah, I should, yeah. But, I mean, thematically, and when you combine it with Acts, I mean, like, the Bible is fun, people. I mean, like, sometimes Bible reading kind of feels like a drag, or, I've got to get through this. And some people just view it as very, I don't know, dusty, very dry or whatever. No, man, like, and this is something that we've got to do a better job of teaching people, like, how to read deeply and how to study and get into stuff, because it's exciting. It's the best literature ever written because God wrote it. And so it's not just simple textbook kind of stuff. It's very well crafted, all of it. So yeah, no, Matthew, you make a good case. I don't know. I'm going to keep my list, but
hold on a second. I want to guess your number one, and Will, I'm going to have you guess. I'm guessing Hebrews. Did he say
no? That's a good guess.
Will?
He didn't have Genesis in his top 5, did he?
Yeah, no, I said we all had Genesis, so it's Genesis.
Oh, you did have Genesis.
Yeah,
oh,
yes. Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah, so
wow.
Number one.
You guys have both said it. I want to add a couple of things. Number one, I feel like Abraham is the most underrated person in the Bible by Christians. If you ask people who's your favorite Bible character, David, Daniel, Joseph, I mean,
Joshua,
Jesus excluded.
Yeah,
Joshua. Yeah, I mean, Joseph, even in the book of Genesis, Abraham's not people's favorite. And you read the arc of the story, like, Abraham, I feel like, is the second most important person to ever live behind Jesus. Because, they come off the ark and it's like, cool, we reset, we're back to the good guys. There's only good people on earth. And immediately it falls apart.
Hang on.
Go ahead.
Without Noah, Abraham would not have existed.
I mean, that's true, but
without Adam, we wouldn't be here. So
yeah, okay. I mean, like you can do those things.
That's true. Anyway, sorry.
With those you've got again, it's devolving. And when I actually taught a class on a Wednesday night here a few months back, sometime last year, and the whole class was about mainly the genealogy of Noah. And how much went wrong from the genealogy of Noah and Ham and Canaan and all that. And, like, immediately the world is devolving again, and Tower of Babel, and it's awful, and God has to split everybody up, and you think, they didn't learn the lesson. I mean, like, they're trying to outsmart God again. Like, we just had to destroy the whole world, and now it's lost again. And then there's one guy, and everything hinges on him. And, we sing that goofy song, Father Abraham had many sons, and as a kid, I'm like, why are we singing this? But now it's like, that's my great-great-great-great-grandfather. Even though there's no blood there, you look at the New Testament, when it points back to Abraham, is like, we're all in him. And so he's so pivotal to the entire history of humankind. Is like, that's where it shifted to where here the plan kicks into gear through this guy. But then, again, the literary stuff, you brought up Joseph and Judah and Tamar and the way that's interwoven together. It's also hilarious. I think I've sent you guys the memes I made up of the Joseph and Jacob stories. Funniest part of the entire Bible. It is so funny, man. Like, I don't know. I love that book so much. I love Genesis. It's too good. And so
it's safe to say, on those like Facebook things you see, where which table will you be sitting at in heaven? You'll be sitting at Abraham's table discussing with him.
Probably
Abraham's
so.
bosom,
yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Oh.
Very nice. Nice reference.
Okay, so recap top fives real quick, Jack. Go for it.
All right, so mine was Mark, which I'm regretting, but whatever. Proverbs, Psalms,
Bad
Romans,
pick.
Genesis. Joe, you had...
That's a bust pick, and like in the draft pick, like, man, at number 5, it better be real good. And you chose Mark. I don't know. Genesis.
Yeah, that's an Anthony Bennett pick. No, just kidding. Sorry. Mark's great.
Poor Mark. Poor Mark.
What you got, Joe?
Ryan Leaf. Number 5, Genesis. Number 4, John. Number 3, Psalms. Number 2, Romans. Number 1, Ephesians.
Nice. I had Proverbs at 5, Ephesians 4, Genesis 3, Romans 2, and Matthew 1. So not really any curveballs in there.
No, but we did
Other than
disagree. I mean, like, we had overlap a lot, but it was not... I thought we were all going to go and be like Romans, Genesis, Psalms, like pick a God. Right. Yeah, I mean, there was similarities, but...
So this is going to be the interesting part, I think, is we each ranked the most important, and obviously we're going to feel more like this is a little bit more objective than subjective like the favorites were. So I don't know how we want to do this. I think we need to all give our one and explain why, and then work our way down the list. I guess I'll go first. I got Romans at 1.
I got Genesis at 1.
Really?
Yeah, I got Genesis at 1.
Jack, do you have...
I didn't rank these. I'll put Romans at 1 as well.
Okay.
You got everything in Romans. You've got... I mean, if you give somebody Romans to read, they've got the entire plan for redemption. They've got all of it there. They don't have it with Genesis.
That's true.
They've got the foundation for it with Genesis, but...
Yeah, I feel like your need for, like, who is God? Yeah, I guess you get that in Romans too, but, like, who is God and where did we come from? And every existential question known to man is basically grounded in Genesis. But you're right.
I guess the way that I looked at it was like, okay, if I could give somebody only one book to read, Romans.
Sure.
Okay, for the second one. If I could only give them Romans and
that.
something else.
Yeah. I have Romans at 2.
So I went Romans.
I have Romans at 2 for that reason.
Okay.
Like, I think if you had Genesis and Romans, you literally could... that's almost I'm not saying all you need. Yes, we need all 66, but you know what I mean. Like, you'd have an understanding of where we came from, God.
Well, just to illustrate this, so people don't think we're saying, "Oh, we don't need some of the books of the Bible." It's one of those party games of if you're on a deserted island and you're only allowed 2 Bible books, or for the rest of your life, or if you could only drop 2 into the jungle in Africa where they're going to be able to read it. Yeah, these are that's the kind of game we're playing. We're not saying, man, Obadiah doesn't matter, but on the other hand, are you going to drop Obadiah into the jungle and hope they read that? No. And so, yeah.
You got some
I'll go ahead and get my
in
2.
Obadiah that are like, what is going to happen?
Right.
Sorry.
When I originally made the list, I had Genesis number 2 as well. And then I was like, would I give 2 books before giving a single gospel that describes Jesus? And so I flipped it. Genesis is my number 3. And I've actually got John as number 2, which might sound crazy considering Matthew is my favorite. But I think John, the spiritual way the book is written and really showing you the depth of all the I am statements of Jesus and just really paints him in a different light, in my opinion. Not my favorite to read and preach from, but Romans and John to me are the 2 that I would give to use the analogy. Somebody on a desert island, those are the 2. You get the plan for salvation, all of it, and you get Jesus. So I did have Genesis 2 and then flipped it to 3.
I have Genesis at 2, but you're right. I probably should flip it to 3. Oh, well.
Well, so I'll get into my number 3 because number 3 I have is Matthew, and this is where we flipped. So you put John and I put Matthew
That's
in, and
interesting,
we were talking off air about this like right before. Oh boy, Jack is sharing a meme. You'll have to.
Okay.
You got to subscribe to Focus Plus in order to get it. But
Yeah.
You'll see it there. But anyway, I think we were talking off like.
This is why Jack didn't rank his. He was too busy making memes.
That's right.
Exactly
that's why I missed my ranking there. Yeah.
Sermon on the Mount. You're good. Sermon on the Mount. It gives you the Lord's Supper, which John has the extended, but he doesn't actually have the institution of the Lord's Supper. It also has, a much like chapter 26 is what 70 verses long or whatever. Like the whole procession leading up to Jesus' death. Yes, John gives that, but it's got all the parables. It's got the Great Commission. So Matthew has things that I enjoy studying John more, but how much would we lose out if you did not have, again, Great Commission, Sermon on the Mount, the parables, all of that stuff. So I put that as number 3 on my list, and I'm with you in the fact that how can you Top 2, I probably should have put a gospel, but yeah, this is a close number 3.
Well, I've got Genesis at 3, so yeah, it's close. It's close. Jack, so if you had Genesis at 2, what is your number 3?
I'm cheating a little bit, but it's just Luke Acts is one book. It just is. The scroll wasn't long enough.
No,
that's cheating.
It's one
that's
book.
That's cheating.
Nope,
the scroll wasn't long enough. Oh my word!
Because I've got Acts as number 4.
Okay.
Acts is my number 4. You have to have Acts.
Well, yeah, that's why I put it at 3 with Luke.
Oh, give me a break.
Okay, yeah, that might be cheating some. So I'll keep my list of So Luke 3, Acts 4. That's fine. If you guys are gonna make me keep to the rules strictly,
we will.
So I've got Acts at 4. Joe, how about you? What do you have at 4?
I got Exodus at 4.
Ahead of Acts?
Yes. I don't know. I didn't have Acts on my list, which is terrible.
Oh wow.
That's.
Yeah,
I guess Joe just thinks we don't need the church.
Apparently.
Hey,
Top 5 greatest quarterbacks ever doesn't even include Tom Brady anywhere on it. Like, okay.
It doesn't.
Correct.
It doesn't. Don't put that one out there. Yeah, there's other ones. But yes, I have Exodus at 4, and the reason why, like, we've been studying on Fridays with Buddy Bars. Shout out Joey, if you're listening. But we've been studying through Exodus. We're 3 or 4 chapters in, and it's already like blowing our minds of, well, what about this? And this points toward Christ, and this points toward this and that, and the coming out, like, all the allusions obviously toward the New Testament, those are varied and significant, and there's a ton of them. But just as a book in general, yes, you get into the weeds starting in like chapter 20 at Sinai, and it goes into all of those things, but it's not the weeds so much as it really helps you understand God's holiness, like the nature of God and how they came out of slavery and everything else. And so, I don't know, I think in Moses, I put Moses as the second most significant character outside of Christ. I know Abraham, you have that. I think Moses is the second. And, well,
that's a good
Paul's
debate
in there. I don't know. But, yeah, Moses is... It tells the entire story arc of, not the entire thing, but most of it, of like his coming into power kind of as a man of God. And it is a tough, like, you killed a guy. Moses killed a guy, like it's not a easy story. And he goes into Midian and he's hiding for 40 years, and the burning bush, and then the whole thing with his wife and the foreskin. And I mean, that's kind of a weird thing. But then he comes back in, and it's this, man, I can't even speak. I don't have any words. I need Aaron for me. And then it kind of his rise into, okay, now he's really leading God's people. And I don't know. So I have Exodus at 4.
Well, Moses flees Egypt, goes to the mountain, meets God, or spends 40 years in the wilderness, meets God in the mountain. All of Israel leaves Egypt, goes to the mountain, meets God, 40 years in the wilderness. I mean, just the way it echoes like that. There's a lot of stuff like that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've got it at 5. I was looking, like, I didn't really know what to put 5, and then I got to thinking, like, okay, again, based off of if I have only given them Romans, John, Genesis, and Acts so far, Exodus would be the next one to me because of the law as well. Like, you get the 10 Commandments, the original, how that started. And so I'm very curious, Joe, what your number 5 is if you don't have Acts in your top 5. That's very interesting to me. But yeah, I've got Exodus at 5. So my most important ranking was Romans, John, Genesis, Acts, and Exodus.
Well, so I had Exodus and then Psalms when I was trying to cheat with Luke Acts, but since you made me bump Luke and Acts apart, now I got to pick between Exodus and Psalms. I had Exodus ahead of Psalms originally. Just to be different, I'm going to put the Psalms there. There you go. The songbook of the Bible. So.
Okay. I'm actually going to shift. I should have thought of Acts. I don't know. I don't think of Acts. It's insanely important. I was going to put Ephesians. I was going to put Ephesians because I feel like, but Romans touches on a lot of what Ephesians touches on. Ephesians just does it really, really well. But the Christian living of 4, 5, and 6, putting on the armor of God, how to treat your wife, how to treat, your slaves and masters and children, obey your parents in the Lord. And like, I think and walking in a worthy manner and the unity of the church. Romans hits on a lot of that stuff, but I feel like Ephesians does it even, like, if it's blasphemous to say even better, but I really do feel like it does it better, more succinctly in terms of Christian conduct and how to live. So I think it's insanely practical. That's why I had Ephesians. You could make a case, obviously, for Acts. I think you could also make a case potentially even for Hebrews, that if you know the old
Hebrews
law,
has not been discussed much this episode.
No, I think you could make the case, though, that's on there. Like, how did we go from Genesis, Exodus, the law being given, to where we are today? And Hebrews really shows the importance of Christ not against the old law, but like through the old law. So I think you could throw that on there and be okay with it. But yeah, I had Ephesians as my number 5.
All right.
This was fun, fellas.
It's been interesting.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Most of it, there wasn't any like crazy takes. We are going to have to do one on Jonah or something. I like that VBS myth. I mean, the whole idea of VBS is a myth. So, sorry.
Let's not get on that hot take.
I know.
Oh, man.
But anyway, yeah.
I'd encourage all of our listeners, comment with your top 5 of each of those, favorite, important, however you want to put it. I mean, it's very interesting to hear.
Come up with your own hot take. You know, if you've got one on there that's...
We've been doing some heavy episodes. We've been doing some controversial, unintentionally episodes, and it was just like, you know what, we need a break. We need to get back to something lighthearted, like we used to do these every few months or so. And so let's do a list like this. But we haven't engaged much with the deep thinkers lately. We've been busy. You guys have been busy. It's summer. There's camps. There's Vacation Bible Schools. There's vacations. Whatever it is, we wanted to get the comments flowing again. We wanted to get the feedback, and so give us your top 5 favorites, top 5 that you think are most important, however you want to define that. And yeah, I mean, we'll have a deep end episode on this, which I think will be interesting. I think, especially with the deep end for our Focus Plus people, I'm interested in getting comments and getting to talk about ones that maybe we didn't expect on there, like the ones that weren't on our list or in our consideration, and seeing what people have to put out there for that. But use the Facebook page, Focus Plus subscribers. Be sure to be on the Patreon. Anything else we got to add?
I'll be heading to start an in-depth study of Psalms, since that's not in my top 5.
There you go. Yeah, Will's going to repent. And
if you give us your top 5, and Romans and Genesis are not on your top 5 or Genesis, we will be making fun of you. Just be aware of that. But that's okay.
They might make a really good case, man. They might make a really good case.
Yeah. They might. That's true. We might get like we may be opening ourselves up to like novels of where somebody's just typing down why it's the best book ever and Esther or whatever.
Hey, it's interesting to do.
I was going to say, please do. Yeah. Please do. I would love to see it. We want to get that in. So,
I mean, of 66 books, there were some that I couldn't even consider that I love. I mean, the 1st and 2nd Samuel, and I mean, just didn't even come close.
Timothy, fantastic.
Yeah, Timothy and Titus, Hebrews that you brought up earlier, James. I mean, like, how did we not put James on there? James will show up on people's lists because people love it. It's great. So yeah.
But the lesson from this is I got to go study Psalms. Jack's clearly got to go study Ephesians, and Joe needs to read Acts.
Seriously.
What is Acts? Is that a
right?
Is it a short comic book? I hope so. That's all I read.
Right. All right, we'll get out of here for this week. Again, we're looking forward to the comments. Share it. YouTube is another one. If you're listening on there, drop your comments. We'll be collecting them. That's part of the hard thing is we have comments coming in like email, Facebook, YouTube, Patreon. We're going to try and catch them all. Be sure and leave your feedback, and we'll look forward to talking to you guys again soon.